Hello and happy new year and welcome to another episode, or happy week or happy year or happy day, depending on when you are watching this, because today's video is going to be relevant regardless of the time you're watching this, because we are going to be exploring 5 business models that you can potentially look into. And what's really going to be special about this video is that almost every business model that we mention, it's going to be very beginner friendly. They are all business models that you're going to hear personal experiences, so the stuff that I've personally explored as well, or know of someone that has explored that particular business model. So it's not something that you're just going to take it from an article. And the big idea is that they're also all going to be very relatively beginner friendly. So you're not going to have to worry about things such as we're not going to mention things like drop shipping, Amazon FBA, retail stores, starting a club, hotel, any of those kinds of major. These are going to be relatively beginner friendly business models. So if you're very new to the entrepreneurial world, this is the video for you. So with that being said, let's just get right to it. But real fast, before we begin, as always, if you guys enjoy videos like this, remember to smash the like button to share support, or you can watch to the end to decide. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell for similar videos. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, or any personal experiences you might have with any past business models you've explored. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So we're just going to run through the 5 business models, but the first business model that we really have to explore is going to be an arbitrage e-commerce business. And what makes this business particularly special and very different than all the other kinds of e-commerce businesses like Amazon FBA, Shopify, dropshipping, or anything like that, is that in a traditional arbitrage business that we're talking about, you can basically start as little as almost no money, because the reason why and how this business model works is essentially it's like your traditional business where you're going to be buying things for cheap and then simply resell them. So in other words, buy low, sell high. What's really cool about this business model is that you technically don't even need to actually pay for really anything if you're able to find certain things inside of your house already to start to sell them, to kind of gain some experience. After you're able to do that, then what happens is that now you can greater expand and then buy things online. I know a very, very common place is probably going to be AliExpress. There is Alibaba, but I know that in Alibaba, and because again, I speak as someone that has actually tried this business model before, is that in Alibaba, you have to typically buy it in bulk, but there's a website called AliExpress where you can buy things individually, and you don't have to buy a massive bulk. You can even just spend $100 and just buy a bunch of products that you think can potentially sell relatively well. This is especially true if it's a product that you're relatively familiar with. So say, for example, you're very, very big into fashion, you're very big into toys, you're very big into stationery products, kitchen supplies, maybe you're a cook or anything like that. If you can ideally find a niche of a product that you're very familiar with and then buy products for discounts at that price, you can now potentially take it and then resell it and then do this repeatedly over and over again. There is one thing about e-commerce which I do tell a lot of people, which is that it can be a little bit difficult to scale for very unique reasons that I don't think a lot of other videos are going to tell you, but that's going to be something that we're going to dive into another day because it can be really, really in-depth. Maybe comment if that's something of interest, but that's going to be the first business model that we're really going to share. The second business model is interestingly something that also is related to Amazon, kind of related to Amazon because again, but it's really that you can potentially start an ebook publishing company. And how this particularly works is that essentially what you're going to do is that you're going to go out there and try to write on your own ebook of some kind. Now, say for example, what makes this particularly beginner friendly is that if you are already passionate or skilled about something, you can write a book about that particular something and then self-publish it onto a place like Amazon Kindle or your own personal website. But I say especially because for beginner friendly sake, Amazon Kindle is something that's probably the most beginner friendly that you can think of. And again, I've explored this business model before. The only downside about this business model is that the competitiveness of the niche that you write in will vary very, very drastically, and it might be a little bit difficult to market. But what's cool about it is that because at the end of the day, this is a business model that you can do from home. You don't need to pay any money for it. You can just, write your book and then start to sell it. That's what makes this particularly beginner friendly. And I think that's the really, really awesome thing about it. Now, there is one thing also about this business model is that even if you are someone that doesn't consider yourself a writer, what's really cool is you don't even have to technically write the book. Many books that are published out there, especially by a lot of celebrities, are actually ghostwritten. So in other words, you can even pay someone. Now, obviously, it's a little bit more complex, but at the same time, it's still not that much more complex. You can go to a website such as like Upwork or Fiverr and then essentially go there and try to hire a writer to basically write up a book for you for less than $100. In some cases, even I believe and that's actually what I did actually the first time. I believe it's that I wrote an ebook, or I had someone help me write an ebook, and I believe it only came out to be about 50, 40, 50, 60, not more than $60 or anything like that. And I was able to start to resell them. And that's basically my personal experience. So this is something that you can definitely potentially look into. The next business model that you can potentially look into is really being able to create a social media theme page. This one is really interesting because especially on a lot of sites like Instagram, if you are able to pretty much learn the algorithm or gain practice, and I say this is a relatively beginner friendly is because there are a lot of people right now that are already going to be on social media regardless. So if you're already going to be on social media, you might as well potentially consider trying to look into the social media side and turn it into a business model. So how this works is that there's a lot of details that I can talk about in here, but pretty much what it is that you can create an Instagram account or a TikTok account, or you can create some kind of social media account and try to build up a following over there. How this works is essentially once you build up a reasonable size page, what's really cool is that you can pretty much take that account and you can either sell the account or you can sell marketing for that particular account. So for example, maybe if you run a page about travel, maybe there's a travel company that wants to now market on your page, you can pretty much start a business where you will start to post and market other companies for you on your social media page. So there's a lot of creative ways to really be able to spin off this business model. And what's great is that once again, this is a business model that doesn't cost any money. And I think that's the really cool thing about it, is that you don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing budget. You can spend money. But I do think one thing that's very great about this particular business model is not necessarily about the money that you can make, although that is potentially true if you're good at it, but it's really about the education side. Because at the end of the day, and this was a very big quote about entrepreneurship that I know someone passed down to me, which is about the fact that in the entrepreneurial world, it is really difficult. But while it is true that it's very difficult, and while the success rate depending on the business model might not be very in our favor, what is really cool is that the amount of knowledge that you can learn can potentially become priceless. So how this relates to a social media business is that because most businesses today almost all have to rely on social media for some form of marketing. If you want to start a restaurant, if you want to start a nightclub, if you want to start a hotel, an e-commerce business, social media business, a service business of some kind, all of these businesses often will require social media to market. So if you try to pursue this business model, many of the skills that you have are also going to be very transferable to a lot of other future business models, or even past business models you might have explored or will potentially explore sometime into the future. So just some personal thoughts I really wanted to share about this third business model. Now, the fourth business model is not necessarily a business, or not necessarily one business, which is actually really cool, but it's really a collection of businesses, and it's really about trying to potentially start a service-based business where you provide services to different individual clients. So if you were to go onto a website called Fiverr.com, on Fiverr there's a physical tab that you can look at that shows all of the different skills and services that you can potentially look into. I believe some of them are as basic as writing emails, to writing books, which again goes back to the writing concept, to running a social media page. If you have some kind of basic skill set, and I think at the end of the day most people here can at least write an email of some kind, You know, obviously there's a little bit more of an in-depth thing, you know, because there is some skill involved in trying to write a very good email. But at the end of the day, if there's some kind of service that you can provide, what's really cool is that you can potentially now start a business to provide that service and then use Fiverr or Upwork as a platform to launch your particular business and try to test out the water for you just building up that business to provide that service. And then if that ends up happening and going somewhere, you can now potentially start a website on your own, start your own social media page, and then expand and then really get your business running. And that's why I say some of these business models, a lot of these are actually relatively scalable and beginner friendly because they don't really cost as much money to be able to start a run there, which I think is probably a really, really awesome thing to be able to share. And then the last business model that I think we're going to share in today's video is going to be something that I will admit only some people can do, but it's really about starting an Airbnb business. So how this particularly works is that this is a business model, admittedly, that I have not actually explored, unlike the other businesses which I have. However, it is a business model where if you live, especially in the suburbs or some place that is relatively large in size, you can start an Airbnb, almost like a mini hotel, hostel style Airbnb business, where you pretty much reserve a section of your house and then rent that particular area. Especially if you can close off that area and put a lock on it, you could potentially rent out that room, rent out that space, rent out that home and place in order to provide clients. And depending on where you're located, we could be talking about a couple $100 sometimes every week, at least couple $100 every single week, depending on the size of your place and depending on the location and where you're located. I do admit that this business model is a little bit difficult for some people to pursue, because if you're like me who lives in New York City, and this is the reason why I personally have not pursued this business model, is not because it's not feasible, but it's because if you live in a city of some kind or a place that's known to have very small sized closet apartments, homes, or anything like that, you probably don't have the room to physically rent it out to people. So that's why it can be really, really difficult, and hopefully understandably why it's relatively difficult for some people to pursue this. But if you do have the room for it, I think it could potentially be a really, really great business model to look into that doesn't really involve as much work as most people, I think, really, really think. And I think that's the really, really awesome thing about it. But with that being said, those are pretty much the 5 business models I really, really wanted to cover in today's video. So as always, if you guys found that relatively insightful and haven't done so, maybe remember to smash the like button, consider subscribing, hitting the bell, or feel free to comment any questions, suggestions for improvements, or really any personal thoughts about, honestly, just really anything. It's always great to hear from you guys. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for always stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.